So in the UK today, we were talking a little bit just before the interview about the kind of the state of the church in the UK that is very listless. It's very apathetic in not all areas, of course, but I would say as a majority view that I see. This is my own personal take on things. And in many places today, the church has gone what we would call the seeker-sensitive route, which is basically, for those viewers who don't know what that is, it's basically don't talk about sin, don't talk about hell, don't talk about anything that could potentially upset anybody from coming to church. And so basically the gospel is stripped of all of that. And Jesus is really presented as a social justice warrior. In other words, doing these good works and kind of fighting poverty and fighting this and rallying for this. Yeah. Is Jesus SJW or biblically where is Jesus in this?
I have a lot to say about that. Actually, you're right. It's a very common way to go. Let me say something about seeker-sensitive churches. Okay, one would think that what this means is that there is a group of people who are seeking what? What are they seeking? I think originally this term meant to describe those who are seeking the truth. They're hungry. They realize their lives are not satisfying, living for themselves. There's something bigger than themselves. What is that? What is the truth I'm seeking? So this is seeking. These are people that are saying, what I'm not big enough as a center for the universe. Something bigger than me is what I need to attach myself to. What is that? Okay. So what seeker-sensitive churches end up doing is they end up giving the so-called seeker what he just acknowledged wasn't adequate. Oh, well, I'm going to give you the things that make you feel good and blah, 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 blah. Wait, if there's a real seeker, those people need the truth. Okay, and that's the truth that Jesus gave. Yeah. All right. So what really happens in most seeker churches is not a seeker-sensitive church, but rather, what's the right way to put this? They're not even sensitive, or what they are looking for is to provide a religion that will appeal to a consumer.
Yes. It's a marketed Christianity, yeah.
Yes, of course. It's got kind of the words that sound good. And what do you want? Oh, you don't want sin, they think. So we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about anything that bothers you. We're going to talk, what is it you want us to talk about? We talk about politicians like that who got their finger in the wind, and we don't respect people like that because they are not leaders. But this is what seeker churches end up doing. Yeah. They're putting their finger in the wind. What do people want? We'll give you what you want. You want to have a better marriage? You want to, we'll tell you how to have a good relationship. You want to do more for the poor? We'll help you to do that. Now, I'm not disparaging the work for marriage or the poor.
Sure.
But that is not what Christianity is all about. All right. And you mentioned the term social justice warrior. And a lot of people don't realize that social justice is actually a term of art that is part of a different worldview. It doesn't just mean helping the poor. It is a piece of a larger puzzle called critical race theory, CRT, that is consuming the universities right now and much of the population and even the church. Now, people don't necessarily have to get all up on CRT. That's a whole, but I'm just saying that it's a different worldview.
Yeah,
and it's a view that certain groups are oppressor groups and others are oppressed groups, and you, Paul, would be an oppressor just because you're a member of the group, even if you're the nicest guy in the world. And so it's group guilt, and what social justice is paybacks. Okay, it's what we give to the so-called oppressed groups to pay them back for having been oppressed. Now, I'm not taking on the worldview right now. I'm not saying good, better, or indifferent. I mean, I have my own concerns, obviously. But I'm just making the point, when Christians or anyone adopts that language, they are really promoting an understanding about how the world works. Okay, the biblical view is different. Okay, the biblical view is that there are poor people and there are some that are not poor. Okay? And the biblical view is not that people are poor as a result of injustice. Some people are just poor. Okay? And we are to help them. Not because we owe them, but because we are charitable and love them.
Yeah.
Okay, think the Good Samaritan here kind of thing. So there's a proper concern for those who are down and out, but it's motivated by a completely different thing. It's motivated by love. The old word was charity. Okay, you don't hear that much anymore. It's motivated by love, not guilt. That's the new system. Yeah, but and it was to help those who needed the help. Okay, not because it was owed them. That's a government approach,
yeah.
But it's because we want to help them individually. And so that's why so many great, wonderful things were done by Christians, like the end of slavery, famously William Wilberforce in your country and others in ours, and things like that. Wilberforce wasn't just famous for slavery, but for ending slavery as a lifetime work, but he created all kinds of organizations that were meant to help the poor as a result of his Christian convictions. So there is a legitimate place in the Christian worldview for helping those who need the help. But, and here's what's really important, that is not why Jesus came.
Yeah.
So I got really annoyed at what I thought was a distortion of his purpose. And I decided I'm going to go through all the Gospels, and I'm just going to find every single reference to social justice or helping the poor or anything that could be construed in that category.
Yeah.
Social gospel is the way it used to be described. Okay, so I started in the Gospel of John. When I got to the last verse of the Gospel of John, I had nothing on my paper.
Wow.
That means there was not, in the entire Gospel of John, there is not a single word that can be construed as Jesus championing the poor or the Christian's responsibility for so-called social justice or social gospel issues. That was a stunner. Does this mean that Jesus didn't care about it? No, that doesn't mean he didn't care about it. The Old Testament is filled with commands and affirmations of our responsibility for those who are poor before God. Okay, and Jesus held that view too, and so did the early church. But the reason it wasn't mentioned in the Gospel of John is because that isn't the reason that Jesus came. And that's why it could be completely left out of the Gospel of John. And it turns out it does not even appear very much in the synoptics, Matthew, Mark,
not
and Luke.
really. No.
It's with another stunner. You look at the great discourses of Jesus, the bread of life discourse, no mention. The upper room discourse, no mention. The Olivet discourse, no mention. Some things there in the Sermon on the Mount, but those have to be qualified. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Oh, well, that's something different, isn't it?
Yeah.
So anyway, it turns out not to have been the main focus of Jesus. The main focus of Jesus was not what Christians do, but what Christ has done.
Yeah.
Now, this is just a matter, in a certain sense, of empirical examination of the historical texts. Yeah. Okay? I think this is wildly misconstrued regarding Jesus because people keep hearing it over and over and over again, and they don't go back to the primary source documentation to see, is this what actually took place? And the fact that one entire gospel, the last written gospel, the most sublime characterization, some would say, of the person and work of Christ, has no mention of any of that at all, ought to make it absolutely undebatable that this was not the reason that Jesus came, and it was not the main focus of his work. Rather, he was the reason he came, and he was the main focus of his work.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's such a kind of sad situation that kind of in many places in the UK that the church has kind of gone down that route. Some time ago, I heard a minister say that, and he said this from the pulpit, which was quite shocking. He said that if he preached what the Bible actually said, he wouldn't have a church. And then I spoke with another minister probably about 2 years ago, and I said, well, why as a church are you kind of going the seeker sensitive route? He said, well, listen, Paul, I'm paid by a denomination, and I have to, when I take up that residency as a pastor, as a minister within that church from the previous minister, I cannot lose members of the congregation. I have to grow the congregation. And if I preach hard messages, people are going to leave, and if they leave, I'm going to lose my job. And so it's almost like a lot of ministers today are forced into preaching these soft messages to try and grow numbers. And it's such a vicious circle for them.
No, it is vicious, but nobody is forced. They are making a choice.
Oh,
Why
absolutely.
don't we have burlesque on the stage? Why don't we just have burlesque? Why don't we have a bunch of girls dancing around? That'll bring a lot of people in. Okay,
that's
if
true.
you just want numbers, all right. That is, it's so offensive to me, and I know it is for you, Paul. And I think your listeners are reflecting on circumstances in their own communities that are examples of this. Okay. What do we think of people who do that? I mean, just an outsider. I'm just thinking from an outsider's perspective. Okay, I'm thinking of the church. Okay, if I was an outsider, say you're a guy who gets up there to preach about religion, and what you're really preaching about is just stroking people's feelings and trying to help. You're just trying to get a lot more people into your church because now you're getting a lot more money. I mean, that's discreditable in terms of a pastor's purpose. And if the denomination requires that they keep adding more people, because that brings in more money, obviously, then he's in the wrong denomination if he cares about what Christ cares about.
Absolutely.
And that's the critical thing.
Yeah.
We serve an audience of one, not an audience of 1,000 or 2,000 or 4,000 or 8,000. We serve an audience of one. Now, I have a suspicion, and I'm thinking about the citation you offered from the pastor just a moment ago. If I preached what the Bible said, I wouldn't have a congregation. What you wouldn't have, Pastor, is the congregation you have.
You have, yes.
You would have a different congregation. And I know that because under the most extreme circumstances imaginable, from the first to the fourth centuries, Christians preached that message, the biblical message, and they transformed the Roman Empire as a result. That is the power of the truth, but they suffered at the same time. So there is a price to pay for speaking the truth. Yeah. This message changes lives, and it draws people in. You want a church with vibrant people, excited people, you preach the truth. You preach nonsense, and you're going to get people who believe nonsense and live lives of nonsense. Okay?
Yeah. 100%.